Hello history lovers and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. And let's continue our deep dive into the life of Queen Anne Boleyn. We're on part 6 of this series. How are we on part 6? I didn't even realise I had so many notes. So if you've missed out on the earlier parts, make sure to go check them out. 3 months after the birth of the Princess Elizabeth, the young princess was sent to Hatfield Palace as plague had hit London. Her half-sister, the Lady Mary, would join her there to act as a maid of honour. Another person who would change households is Jane Seymour, who had previously been serving the Dowager Princess of Wales, Catherine of Aragon.
From a certain point of view.
But now she was in the household of the new Queen Anne Boleyn. Although it's worth noting that the exact dates that Jane swapped households is not recorded, but she had by the Christmas of 1533, and actually some historians debate whether Jane even did serve Catherine, like at all, but that debate's for a different day. Margaret Pole, Lady Salisbury, who had been the Lady Mary's governess, was dismissed and replaced by 2 from the Boleyn faction, Ladies Anne Shelton and Anne Clear, who were there to spy on the Lady Mary and make her life difficult.
I'm watching you, Wazowski. Always watching.
By December 1533, Queen Anne was pregnant again, much to the royal couple's delight. Also in the December, former Queen Catherine was to be moved from Buckden to Fotheringhay. Both were cold and damp and awful for Catherine's health, and she refused to go, locking herself in her chambers. In February 1534, Anne wrote to Lady Shelton, who had still been spying on Mary, and told her to make sure that Mary was no longer using the title Princess, as that was reserved for her daughter Elizabeth. I can imagine that Mary was just as stubborn as her mother Catherine, who declared she was Queen of England until her dying breath. Anne told Lady Shelton that if she does use the princess title, to slap her face as the cursed bastard that she was. However, even if she wasn't a princess, Mary was still the daughter of the king, and Lady Shelton feared that people would think that she had poisoned her charge if she forever fell ill, which Mary did a lot. Check out my video on the ever-changing appearance of Queen Mary I, but it was reported that she looked emaciated. As a result, Lady Shelton actually began to befriend the Lady Mary. On the 23rd of March 1534, Parliament passed the Act of Succession, which, as the UK Parliament website puts it, the first Act of Succession passed in 1534 required Henry's subject to accept the king's marriage to his second wife, Anne Boleyn, as undoubted, true, sincere, and perfect. This act also removed the Princess Mary from the line of succession and legitimised any children from Henry's marriage to Anne so that they could inherit the throne unchallenged. Unfortunately for Anne, in June 1534, she lost the child that she was carrying. It was born a month prematurely, but it's unknown whether it was stillborn or if the baby died soon after it was born. It is thought that Henry's affair with Jane Seymour may have started in or around 1534, and the baby wasn't the only thing that Anne had lost. Her influence with the king and his love, unfortunately, the loss of the baby is what made her realise this fact. It may have been out of desperation to conceive again, but Anne thought she was pregnant again in the September. However, Chapuis confirmed on the 23rd that the lady is not to have a child after all. Anne's unhappiness was only made worse that autumn, or fall for my American viewers, when her sister Mary appeared at court, noticeably pregnant.
The cheek, the nerve, the gall, the audacity and the gumption.
Her sister's betrayal was a cruel reminder of her own recent failings. Anne banished her sister from court, not just for being pregnant, there was also a secret marriage scandal as well, and it'd be like 3 months till they would actually make contact again. But the main thing is that Mary had actually remarried without asking the permission of their father, the king, or Anne, who, as queen, was effectively the head of the Boleyn family. Mary had done it regardless and apparently had not thought of the scandal her marriage could bring and how it may darken Anne's reputation. As the Queen's sister, she should have been available for the royal couple to make an advantageous marriage, so the royal couple had every reason to be angered by this. Anne seemed to be more angry with her sister than the king. Is it because of her pregnancy? Mary would write to Cromwell and beg him to help her recover favour with the king and queen. I don't think Anne and Mary had ever been particularly close, but Mary ended her letter like this. For well I might ha' had a greater man of birth, but I assure you, I could never ha' had one that loved me so well. I had rather beg my bread with him than be the greatest queen christened.
Okay. Shady bitch.
Obviously, Anne read the letter, and let's just say that didn't go down very well. John Hale mentioned that the Queen's Grace might not suffer to be in the court, so it's highly unlikely that the sisters ever reconciled. In hindsight, though, I wonder if Anne wished she had. It might have been good to have another ally. And as if that autumn couldn't be any worse for Anne, her husband Henry was pursuing an unnamed woman only ever referred to as the very handsome young lady or the imperial lady due to her political sympathies. It is thought, as was many of Henry's extramarital affairs, that the imperial lady was one of his wife's ladies-in-waiting. However, this did not mean that she was loyal to Anne. In fact, she allegedly refused to pay honours to the Queen and showed much support to the Lady Mary. Imperial Ambassador Eustace Chapuis noted on the 27th of September that the king had renewed and increased the love he formerly bore to another very handsome young lady of the court, and whereas the royal mistress, Anne Boleyn, hearing of it, attempted to dismiss the damsel from her service. The king has been very sad and sent her a message to this effect, that she ought to be satisfied with what he had done for her, for, were he to commence again, he would certainly not do as much. She ought to consider where she from, and many other things of the same kind. Yet no great stress is to be laid on such words. With the help of her sister-in-law, Lady Jane Rochford, Anne tried to dismiss this new rival of hers, but ultimately failed, and she felt the full force of Henry's wrath in the process, and poor Jane was banished from court. In hindsight, maybe she should have done what Catherine had done, and waited it out, as 6 months later Henry had tired of his imperial lady. And just to finish the year on a high note, because 1534 has been such a good year for Anne Boleyn, at Christmas, her favourite dog, Perquoy, who had been a gift from Lady Lisle, died.
Why, God, why?
Anne was a great dog lover, and it was Henry who had to break the news to his wife, as no one else dared. At this point, Anne and Henry, despite being together for years, had been married for only 2, and she had so far failed to provide him a male heir. She, in his eyes, was no better than Catherine. Anne had, by all accounts, become arrogant, vain, and her public displays of emotion and volatile temper was embarrassing traits that weren't desirable for a queen. Hopefully, the new year of 1535 would bring happiness to Anne. Yeah, no, 1535 would be the year that John Hale, Vicar of Isleworth, and no friend to Anne, claims that the King's Grace had meddled with the Queen's mother. Henry himself would deny this allegation, while simultaneously admitting to his affair with Mary Boleyn, and unsurprisingly, this rumour was spread to discredit Anne. Hale was a supporter of Catherine and wanted to bring into question the legality of Henry and Anne's marriage. This wasn't the first time that Anne had to face rumours being spread about her, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Instead, she turned her focus onto her ward and nephew, Henry Carey. She hired celebrated French humanist and poet Nicolas Bourbon as his tutor on the recommendation of Dr. Butts, the king's physician. Now, this is a bit controversial, but Anne would go on to tell Henry that in her dream, God told her that it would be impossible to conceive a child while Catherine and Mary lived. Apparently, She said that they were traitorous rebels who deserved to die. I mean, I know she was getting a bit desperate, but a bit harsh, Anne, come on. Just stick them in the Tower of London and throw away the key if you're that concerned. Fortunately, Henry failed to be manipulated, but this was also another major blow to Anne, as this failed manipulation was just another sign of her diminishing power over her husband. He had also taken up a new mistress. This didn't seem to last long, as on the 25th February 1535, Chapuis reported that the young lady who was lately in the king's favour is so no longer. There has succeeded to her place a cousin of the concubine, daughter of the present governess of the princess. Anne at this point knew she could not stop Henry's affairs, so she tried to control who he had affairs with, putting forward her cousin Madge Shelton, in the hopes of using Madge and her familial connections to regain her own favour with the king.
Not a great plan.
The affair didn't last long. Not sure why it came to an end, but I do know that Anne got jealous despite being the one that arranged it.
Say what?
And the affair was so short that it did nothing to improve her relationship with her husband. By mid-March, finally some positive news for Anne, as she was visibly pregnant again. No more is known about this pregnancy, so it's safe to say that it ended as either a stillborn or a miscarriage at the end of June. Queen Anne, as we know, was a Protestant, so for those who embraced the Lutheran faith, she had become a beacon of hope, and they believed that she shared their views. I can tell you now she didn't, but she did try and influence the king to be tolerant with heretics. So you can see why they thought this, especially when Anne's intervention had saved some from persecution. Maybe it's because she could feel that she was unpopular, or she was trying to improve her image as a better and more pious queen. But towards the end of Anne's life, she was rarely seen in public without a book of devotions in her hand to try and create this image of herself as a godly matron. Information like this is what really intrigues me about Anne Boleyn, as she is known to have a bad temper, manipulative, be brash at times, and yet there is this other side of her, the side where she aids poor scholars, provides money for their education, and as far as we know from 1532 until pretty much her end, she did charity work and supported many charities, and she encouraged her ladies to do the same. On the 22nd of June 1535, the Catholic Bishop John Fisher was beheaded, and as he and fellow Catholic Sir Thomas More, who was executed later on the 6th of July, refused to take the oath of supremacy and accept Henry as the head of church, it is said that it was Anne who was pushing Henry to execute the men. Chapuis noted, "When the lady wants anything, there is no one who dares contradict her, not even the king himself." Which, to an extent, is true, but we know that Anne's influence with Henry was fading. The main reason he granted her wish... Oh, hang on, I've just made Henry VIII sound like a genie, but okay.
What do you need?
See, the thing is, Anne was pregnant, and as she had already lost a baby since Elizabeth, he didn't want to do anything to stress her out and harm the baby, as when Henry does not want to do as she wishes, she behaves like someone in a frenzy. The sad thing about the execution of Bishop Fisher was that he was 76. He could have just rotted in the tower. There was no need for that. His and More's execution did not go down well, and Anne was blamed probably for both of their deaths, but more so for Fisher's. So when Anne's pregnancy resulted in a stillbirth, it was all hushed up. So imagine the backlash if she had convinced Henry to execute Mary and Catherine, followed by her stillbirth. When Anne wasn't busy trying to get people executed or helping charities, she would often visit her daughter at Eltham or Hatfield. So she must have been delighted in the July when she and Henry were able to enter negotiations with King Francis I of France for a marriage between the Princess Elizabeth and his third son Charles. This was a shun to Mary supporters, as she was seen as the next in line to many, despite the law saying otherwise, and her marriage should have been arranged first. On the 4th of September 1535, the King and Queen stayed at Wolfhall in Wiltshire, the family home of Henry's next wife, Jane Seymour, who he would marry within the next 12 months.
Coincidence? I think not!
Right, Bernie.
Don't Bernie me! This little rat is guilty!
Despite what Bernie thinks, there is no evidence to suggest that Henry and Jane's relationship started here. The royal couple would stay with the Seymours for 6 days. Now, with the power of hindsight, we know that Anne's days are drawing to a close, but obviously she didn't know that yet. However, Anne could sense danger from all sides. Henry's affairs, the Lady Mary, and, more importantly, the woman she had replaced, Catherine of Aragon. Anne believes that all the time Catherine lived, her own existence was on shaky ground. She is my death, and I am hers. The true irony was the fact that Catherine was in fact Anne's saviour, as Henry would not cast her aside all the time Catherine lives, otherwise that would mean he made the wrong choice. Thankfully for Anne, she was pregnant yet again by November. This would be her last chance to provide the king a male heir, as Henry's tolerance for his wife was limited, and even if she didn't know it, Anne was feeling the pressure, as she apparently suffered with depression during the first few months of her pregnancy. Her mental state was not helped by Henry and Jane's relationship and the king parading his new mistress. Anne also tried to get Catherine and Mary executed, again, this time out of fear for the threat they posed herself, Elizabeth, and the unborn baby. But Catherine's health was steadily declining, and Henry thought it was best to leave her be. On the 1st of December that year, Anne thought that Catherine might recover from her illness. Anne begged yet again for the two women's death, but Henry again ignored her pleas. The English ambassador to Spain reported that people expected to hear every day of the execution of Queen Catherine, and the Princess Mary was expected soon to follow her. That December, Anne went to Sion Abbey, presumably to see her ward and nephew Henry Carey, who was studying here at the time, and check on his progress. And while she was here, she didn't miss the opportunity to lecture the nuns about their Catholicness. On the 30th of December 1535, Catherine of Aragon's health was really bad, and in the next few days, Catherine would be joined by her friends Eustace Chapuis and Maria de Salinas. Catherine would die on the 7th of January 1536, at the age of 50. Chapuis informed Henry of her death, and he rejoiced, and Anne declared, "Now I am indeed queen." That is, of course, prior to her then being accused of poisoning the former queen. This is where I'm going to leave today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you really liked this video, then why not leave a super thanks? I've got more videos on Anne Boleyn and her family, Henry and his wives, as well as the other Tudor monarchs. So check that out if that interests you. But until the next one, have a wonderful day.